So we now come to Tod Machover, and I used to be impressed by Tod because he's a member of the faculty of that collection of geniuses called the MIT Media Lab, and because he's an inventor of wonderful, eccentric new musical instruments. I've seen a couple of them. One of them is a chair that you sit in, and you create the music by waving your arms around and intercepting, I think they were laser beams or charged particles or something fabulous. And then, of course, he's written lots of operas, including his latest, which is an opera for robots. But I've recently learned that the real reason to be impressed by Tod Machover is that it's his lab that actually is responsible for those enormous computer game hits called Guitar Hero and Rock Band. Hey, so please welcome my pal, Tod Machover. What a guy.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I forgot to mention. And because he deals with music as therapy. That's it. That's what I meant to say.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Moses. Delighted to be here. He told my whole story, so I don't have anything to say. I do a lot of unusual things in music. I'm in music because I believe it's one of the most powerful things in our lives. It's something that touches all of us, that connects all of us. And my career has been devoted not only to making music, but to trying to make music accessible and available to as many people as possible, and to make it as powerful an activity in people's lives as possible. And I want to tell you a little bit about that today, and I'll touch on the various aspects of what I do that Moses mentioned. So I guess I'll start a little bit with kind of why I do this stuff. And you know, I was very lucky because I grew up in New York, and my mom is she's still in her 80s and extremely active as a music teacher, very creative music teacher, piano, and teaches music creativity. And my dad is one of the pioneers, original people in computer graphics. So he was always designing new machines that would help human beings interact with computers. So it was kind of obvious that I'd do something with music and technology, which I ended up doing, in fact. I got there by playing cello, so I'm a performer. That's what I like to do. By the time I was a teenager, I was wiring up my cello with all kinds of weird things. And this is probably most of you don't know who that is. This was my mentor when I went to Juilliard. And if you want to talk about an inspiration for all of us as we age, this is Elliott Carter, who was in his 70s when I studied with him at Juilliard. He's now 102. He's the most famous composer in the world. He will be Beethoven, in 50 years. He's our Beethoven. And at 102, he's gotten more and more creative. He writes pieces for the Boston Symphony and the Berlin Philharmonic, more each year, better each year. It's unbelievable. Worth studying how he does that. But I think because he's involved in music, and especially in unusual music, and thinking about music and changing music every single day, that's at least a large part of why he stays so young. He's an incredibly youthful man, and he's 102. And so through all of this growing up, because of my parents and because of my training, I think one of the great things about music is that it's a fantastic laboratory to let us imagine. It has to do with our emotions, it has to do with real life, it has to do with our experiences, but it's also abstract in a way, and you can think about ideas and feelings in music in a way you can't any other way. And so while I was going to school and imagining music, I just started thinking of music that didn't exist any other way. I started hearing sounds that nobody had heard before, and to do that, I had to. One of the things that inspired me for the work I did after were things like the Beatles at the end of the '60s. Somebody who's a local here, Glenn Gould, at the end of the '60s. Anybody know what's similar about what the Beatles and what Glenn Gould were doing at the end of the '60s? Anybody think? Say again. That's right. Both these, the Beatles and Gould, by the end of the '60s, had decided that the only way to make music was in a studio. They stopped performing live. They thought the only way to make music was to piece it together bit by bit in a studio. They didn't want to be in front of a public anymore. And so when I was a kid, I started thinking, well, that's not right, because music is about spontaneity and gesture and communication. How can we have the best of both worlds? How can we take what these guys can do beautifully in a studio, but put it back on stage, put it back in live performance? So how can you make these guys do something live? So the first thing I started inventing were things called hyper instruments, which were exactly that idea. I took instruments, connected them with technology so the instrument knew how it was being played. So this is, for instance, an instrument I built for Yo-Yo Ma called a hypercello, where when Yo-Yo plays this, the instrument knows not only what's being played, but how it's being played. So if yo-yo emphasizes a certain F sharp or pushes to a downbeat, the cello can become a voice or a whole orchestra or something you've never heard before, all through his interpretation. We build these for many, many musicians. And when we built this, we realized that the things that we were designing for yo-yo, both the instrument and also the software, could actually open doors for anybody. So the kind of thing that Moses was talking about, that's Bono on the left from U2, playing the chair that Moses was talking about. Electricity goes through your body when you sit on the chair. When you move your hands in the chair, it measures your gesture, and you make music just by waving your hands in the air. And it's interesting enough for anybody in this room could sit down and make music with it, but somebody like Bono finds it interesting enough that you can make really interesting music. So various people use it in concerts. And we designed something called the Brain Opera, which is a giant orchestra designed for the general public to make music without having any experience. Another great thing about doing this kind of work, it's permanently in Vienna now. So if you're in Vienna next week, you can go and see these instruments. This is a big percussion instrument that fills the whole room, like a bunch of flowers. You can take music, pop it into the wall with these little tokens, and modify it by moving your finger on a screen. And you can sit in this chair and make your own version of this composition. And usually when you imagine and make these unusual kind of projects, there are always surprises. What results from it are usually not what you imagined. In this particular project, Esma gave it away already, but two of my students who worked on the Brain Opera and helped design all of these instruments and software went and formed a little company down the street, struggled for about 8 or 9 years, and then ended up making Guitar Hero and Rock Band, which show, first of all, it's great that they were as successful and we still work closely together. It also shows that this idea of making music activities that anybody can be part of, whether or not you're trained as a musician, is something really interesting. It can open the doors to lots of things. But if you've ever tried, how many here have actually played Guitar Hero or Rock Band? Yay. Well, not too many hands. But part of that is because they're okay, but they're not really all that great. So for instance, Rock Band and Guitar Hero are not very personal. They don't allow you really to express yourself, and they're not creative at all. And my own feeling is that the most interesting thing in music is to make your own music, to be involved, to create your own music, and you can't do that in the games that exist now. So after inventing those kind of things, we started thinking about children, how to introduce children to music, and we made a big project which still goes on called Toy Symphony. We make instruments like the little round orange thing, which is a squeezy instrument. You can squeeze the music just by touching that soft object. The one in the middle is called a beat bug. You can make all kinds of rhythms just by tapping it and moving little antennas on the instrument. And then this Hyperscore was really a transitional, important project. We wanted to make something where anybody could compose their own original music. So Hyperscore uses colors and lines drawn on a computer screen. You can make the most sophisticated music, push a button, and it writes out the parts for any real instruments to play. So we go around the world. We started with kids, now it's for people of all ages, where you can write a piece in Hyperscore and have a symphony orchestra play your piece. So here's just a little bit about Hyperscore.
Hyperscore is a computer program that gives children the power to compose. They only have to be able to draw a line.
It allows you to compose a piece of music without knowing anything about the rules of music or without knowing musical notation. It uses a graphic language that we developed, and you draw and paint on the screen, and your marks are turned into music.
As children change the shape, length, colour and position of their lines, they create music. The software acts as a translator, taking the kids' designs and turning them into musical scores, the language of professional musicians. It all sounds impressive in theory. How does it sound in reality?
So that's a piece written by a 9-year-old girl in inner city London. That was the BBC Symphony Orchestra playing her piece, broadcast all over the world on BBC 3. And the results have been just amazing in terms of kids stepping forward, being able to write pieces, feeling like, oh my gosh, I can do this. And of course they can do that because everybody feels music. If you're given the right tool, you can make music, evaluate it, shape it, and have it played by amazing musicians. So we had such good results with children around the world that we started thinking, what are other applications where music made available to people can really make a difference? So we have a growing program at the MIT Media Lab in using music for direct interventions on health. And there's so many stories I could tell you if we had more time, but as you probably know, music is the last thing that most people still react to when they have advanced Alzheimer's disease. Music is the best way to restore speech to people who have had strokes. Music is the best way to restore movement to people who have Parkinson's, and many, many more. Many things that we don't totally understand, but we're trying to understand so that we can make new musical tools to address as many sicknesses and to keep us all healthy as long as possible. So we use hyperscore in all kinds of medical contexts now for people of all ages. There's a hospital near Boston, part of a network of hospitals where we go all the time to work with people. And one of our closest colleagues is someone named Dan Elsey, who's a 30-year-old who has cerebral palsy. Before we went to Tewksbury Hospital, nobody knew that he had any interest in music. He can't control his body all that well. He can't speak except through a speech machine. But it turned out he loves music, is very talented, and when we put a head tracker on his head, he was able to make the shapes of hyperscore, compose himself, and now he's actually a very accomplished composer. And then we said, well, Dan, your pieces are really good. Would you like to perform them? And he's actually quite a ham. He's very expressive. And he said, absolutely. So then we made a different head tracker, which allows him now to go and perform his pieces in front of the public. And he's been all over. He's actually gotten quite well known. So I'll show you just a little bit of Dan performing his piece called My Eagle Song at the TED conference 2 years ago. And it's just a tiny clip, but you'll see that here's this guy who was never thought of as a musician, who all of a sudden, not only can he present his music, but you see who Dan is through his music. So this is Dan at the TED conference. He's a remarkable guy. I hope you get to see him sometime. So music also is one of our most powerful ways of communicating. When Dan has this tool, you all of a sudden see him as just a person, not as somebody with cerebral palsy. It's the only way he can really communicate. And as Moses mentioned, I just finished a pretty wild opera, which is about somebody else who wants to communicate. Very similar. The opera's called Death and the Powers, and it's about a guy named Simon Powers who basically wants to live forever. And he decides that he's going to download himself into his environment, so he invents something called the system, and he's going to use music and everything around him to express himself. He leaves the world at the end of the first act, but he leaves his environment. And so this is him going away. The stage becomes the main character rather than him. He's off somewhere, and we measure him, and everything around him, all the physical objects, become this person. His family and the people he works with are left, so that's his daughter Miranda, his wife Evie, his third wife Evie, third and final wife they say, and he has a kind of research assistant named Nicholas who helps him build all these things, and they remain trying to figure out, is this really Simon? Is this really my father? Is this my husband? This environment? Is this him? And if it is him, what do I think about it? So he leaves this system, and the system is made up of gigantic walls, these walls that look like his library. They have 3 sides. The walls are actually big robots. They move around on stage on their own. They know where they are. They change images and intensity. They vibrate, and he expresses himself through these walls. Once in a while, you see him a little bit in the walls, but mostly it's kind of his gesture. You can see words on the walls. Other times it's just blasts of light, but you feel his presence on stage through these walls and through the movement and through the light. All the furniture also turns into him. So there's a gigantic chandelier, which at the beginning looks like a big set piece, a chandelier with light streaming out of it, but it's actually a gigantic music instrument. It has about 100 strings. The strings vibrate with Simon's voice, and this is his wife, Evie. There's a big love scene in the middle of the opera between this woman and this gigantic chandelier, and she can also touch the chandelier to play it like a string instrument or dampen and change the sounds of Simon's music by leaning up against the chandelier. And then there are a whole chorus of robots, so he also makes these robots which can express himself. It's the first time I think that robots are characters on stage. There are 9 of them. They're extremely cute. They're very, very fast. They run around stage. They sing. They respond to the actors. Being an actor that has to play with a robot's a totally new thing. They're little ones. They're about 3.5 feet high, and they extend to about 7 feet, so they express all kinds of emotion by the way they move, by their lighting. They're kind of the pets of this guy, Nicholas. They group and form kind of ballets. And there's a huge amount of big team backstage. So we just got back a month ago from Monaco, which is where we did the world premiere of this opera. It was a great place to do a premiere in one of the most beautiful opera houses in the world. One of the patrons of the opera was Prince Albert of Monaco, so there's Prince Albert and Princess Caroline watching this crazy thing at the opening. Luckily, it went extremely well. That's afterwards. And I thought I'd just play you a little short clip just so you can hear what this crazy opera's about before I wrap up.
Billions of bucks, and I can still sign checks.
So you can come see that in Boston and Chicago this spring. Maybe it'll come locally, I'll let you know. And to wrap up, you never know where these projects are leading. One thing we're doing right now is taking the fact that Simon Powers constructed his whole environment, his legacy, through this new form, this system, and we're going to build a new set of tools so that everybody can do that. Just like Hyperscore allowed people to make symphonies, we're making something called personal opera, which is going to let everybody construct their own stories, their own musical stories, and to share them. And this is something designed for people with experience, so for adults, not for kids. And we're rolling this out now. It's a way of kind of taking all your memories and all your experiences and being able to put them into a musical form, like a little opera. You'll be able to make this consciously, but it'll also pull data from your iPhone, from all of your stored information. We're working on this with a consortium that involves, on the one hand, the Royal Opera House in London and Hasbro Toys on the other, so a very eclectic mix. And just to end, we're just starting this project, and as you can see from all of these things, I think one of the things that music means to me is that it's an adventurous medium, and it's a medium where it invites you to take risk. It invites you to take risk in the music you listen to. Yes, it's nice to listen to the comforting music that relaxes you, but music expresses every emotion, and it's an adventure, and you can listen to music that you don't know, and you can think about music in different contexts. It's a wonderful way to stimulate your imagination. And I think that risk, in my own view, trying new things all the time, is one of the essential things about living, and I think music is an incredible way to take risk, and it's really hard to imagine life without music. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Maestro. Outstanding. Thank you.